Okay, hi! I'm Cherry and you've stumbled upon my channel, and today we're going to be doing my February and March reading wrap-up. Just a quick note that after my April and or May reading wrap-ups, I might be doing something different for my monthly wrap-ups in preparation for a series that I plan on doing on my channel. So instead of mentioning the same books over and over again every other video, I might just do a recent reads type of video with books I haven't mentioned yet in any of my upcoming videos. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But anyway, you'll just see soon, hopefully. Anyway, let us get on to the books. There are 12 books to talk about. I keep getting into really weirdly timed reading slumps left and right. So spoiler alert, I failed both readathons that I've joined. Is that a surprise to anyone? I feel like that's on brand at this point, failing readathons. Why do I even bother? Let's start with the books that I read for the Wonderlandathon, which is the Alice in Wonderland inspired readathon that happened in the whole of February. The first book that I read was Letting Anna Go by Beatrice Sparks, otherwise known as Anonymous. I've already talked about this book in a previous video, which is my fiction eating disorder book recommendations. So I talked about this book in depth there, so you can just check it out. I link it down below if you're interested. I will be talking about it here again, but briefly. Basically, Letting Anna Go is about this girl who seems to have her life together, but deep down inside she feels like she's not good enough. So when her best friend invites her to go on this diet, it just ends up spiraling out of fucking control. Letting Anna Go is probably one of the most realistic takes on eating disorders that I've ever encountered in fiction. Recovery isn't linear, and you're gonna end up relapsing like so many times, and that's what happened in this book. It's a little slow at the start because it does begin prior to the eating disorder, but then it goes into really dark places. So if you plan on reading this, just trigger warning for that. It chronicles the main character's struggles via diary entries. I actually really did enjoy it. The next book is a bit of a disappointment, and I feel so bad about that, but it's Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Basterica, translated by Sarah Moses. Basically, if you're huge on devouring content from the horror community, then you've probably heard about this book. Basically, it's about Marcus and his life after an infectious virus has made all animal meat poisonous to humans. What do the humans do? They begin eating other humans. They call it special meat, and basically cannibalism is legal now. And from slaughtering animals, his business has turned into slaughtering humans. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I feel so bad because it was really hyped up and it just didn't really live up to my expectations. It made me think, like, it really did make me think. It felt more like a thought piece, but it was just okay, in my opinion. I expected something more. People keep saying it was the most disturbing thing they've ever read, and while it is disgusting, I will admit that, especially if you're queasy and very against animal cruelty, you do know how animals are slaughtered, right? So this book is that, but just change it to humans. They go into detail about how they slaughter the humans, and I think that was the best part. Otherwise, the story is just okay. I expected more from it because, like I said, everyone speaks so highly about it, but I was just bored for the most part. It was okay. That's really all I'm gonna say. I don't even have much to say about this book. It was just okay. I feel bad because everyone seemed to enjoy it, and for me it was just very mediocre. I don't know, I wasn't scared. It was a little unsettling, a whole lot of disturbing because of the cannibalism aspect, but other than that, it was just... The next book I read was a 5-star read, and that was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carol. Everyone knows what Alice in Wonderland is about. It's one of the very few classics that I actually did enjoy. Like, really, really enjoy it. I gave it 5 stars. It was absurd and very much a wild ride. A lot of it didn't make sense, but I think that was the point, and that was like what a lot of people hate about Alice in Wonderland. It didn't make sense, and that's kind of what I loved about it. There were so many hilarious puns and moments. Alice was an absolute dumbass. She does and says things out of sheer stupidity, and she ended up offending literally everyone she met. She was at least smart enough not to offend the Queen of Hearts, so she obviously got to keep her head. Side note, I probably relate to the Queen of Hearts the most. She's my all-time favorite fictional character, and I'm so glad that I finally was able to read Alice in Wonderland. My obsession with retellings did not make sense until I finally read the original story, and I enjoyed every bit of it. The next book came as an absolute surprise. It's Seasons of the Storm by El Cosimano. Basically, Seasons of the Storm is about the seasons, and they gotta kill each other every transition period, but then winter and spring fall in love. That premise made me pick up the book because I like the idea of forbidden love. I finished reading this book at like 5:30 in the morning because I really wanted to know what happened. And that came as a surprise because this book almost put me in a reading slump last year. I just couldn't get into it because of this weird sci-fi element. I thought it was going to be just purely fantasy, but there was some sci-fi bits to it. And it was so freaking slow at the start. But because I hate DNFing books, I powered through. But once I was like 40% in, I was surprised to find that I just could not put the book down. I thought I would be giving this book like 3 stars at most, but I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was really good. Despite the mixed reviews, I personally really enjoyed it. While I really like the romance, the best thing about this book is probably the friendship. It was just so heartwarming and also heart-wrenching during some parts. There was a scene that made me tear up, and I was so surprised because this wasn't supposed to be like a super emotional book. And to be frank, I am very excited for the sequel that I think is coming out this year. I hope it doesn't drag on the same as in the first book, but I am extremely glad that I powered through because this was really fucking good, and I had tons of fun reading it. Now for a book I read that wasn't part of the Wonderland-a-thon, but I read it anyway because I made it a point to read more poetry this year. So it's very disappointing and I shouldn't be surprised, but it was Bittersweet Love by Michael Faudet. Can I just say that the conspiracy theory that Langleaf and Michael Faudet is one person is very believable to me, but at the same time it's also not, because while Langleaf half-asses her poetry, her prose is fucking amazing. Meanwhile, Michael Faudet's poetry is really freaking good, but his prose is not it. Anyway, I gave this book like 2.5 stars. I remember reading his first poetry collection, it was Dirty Pretty Things. I read his first collection, Dirty Pretty Things, like years ago, and I was really excited for it because I saw some of the Tumblr previews and I was like, okay, this is really good. But the entire poetry collection was very disappointing. And this one is also really disappointing. To be fair, it had more interesting concepts than Dirty Pretty Things, but still the entire thing was painfully mediocre. I'm not going to lie, I enjoyed some of the prose and some of the like mini stories, but all in all it was just mediocre. Michael Faudet is probably like Langleaf's alter ego for when she wants to write like smutty or erotic poetry, and it just does not work. Now let us get on to the books that I read in March. The first book I read in March was Sleepwalking by Meg Wolitzer. I think this is her debut novel. It was written in 1984. I thought it was written in like the 1990s, but apparently it was first published in 1984. It's about 3 college students with a shared fascination with death. These three college girls each have an obsession with a dead poet, specifically a female poet who died of suicide. One of them is obsessed with Sylvia Plath, one of them is obsessed with Anne Sexton, and the third one is obsessed with, what is her name again? Lucy Asher. She's obsessed with Lucy Asher, and you don't have to look up who Lucy Asher is because she's fictional. Created solely for this book. I heard about this book from Josie the Reading Witch, so I was really excited to pick it up because I also have an obsession with dead poetesses who died of suicide. Specifically Sylvia Plath. I was obsessed with Sylvia Plath at one point, and I'm pretty sure some of my friends still remember that. But I gave this book 3.5 stars. I was a little disappointed. I hope to learn more about the Death Girls and their obsessions with their respective poetess, but those parts were discussed very briefly and only at the beginning. We focused on Claire, who is obsessed with Lucy Asher, and while I did like that the author created this very elaborate backstory about Lucy Asher, it just fell flat at the end when they stopped talking about Lucy Asher's life. Also, the Goodreads summary says that there was this guy Julian who enters Claire's life that made her change somehow, and the ending made it seem like Julian was a lot more involved in the plot than he really was. He really wasn't much in the book. There were also a few things that weren't resolved at all, especially friendship-wise, which really bothered me when I finished the book. It left me with a lot of unanswered questions. However, this book did validate my early 2010s emo phase when I stayed up until 4 a.m. reblogging sad quotes from my favorite dead poets on Tumblr. But not gonna lie, still kind of obsessed with Sylvia Plath though. The next book I read in March was something that I was super excited about, and that is True Crime, a novella by Samantha Kolesnik. So we follow Susie and her brother Lim, who lives in a very abusive household with their mom. And when the abuse becomes too much to handle, they go on a cross-country murder spree that begins with their own mother. And we follow Susie's POV as she spirals into madness. This novella was so short, but so action-packed. There was a lot going on. So many things happened, and it was just so good. But I gotta warn you now that there is content warnings for pretty much anything you can think of. The book started out really fucked up already, which surprised me because usually stories get weirder and grosser as they go on, but this one started out really messed up. This is really not your usual thriller. Like, if you're a fan of domestic thrillers, this one might not be for you because it goes to very dark places. There is incest, mind you, not between Susie and her brother, but there is like implied incest. There's murder, obviously, and violence and sexual assault, animal abuse, I think, yeah, kidnapping. Basically every fucking crime you can think of, including arson, it's in this book. None of those are spoilers. It happens in like the first few pages. Like, that's how wild this book is. All of those happen in just the first few pages. I enjoyed my time reading it. My only gripe is that it's super short. I wanted it to be longer, but then again, something that leaves this much of an impact in such a short amount of time is really good. I gave it 4 stars. Again, if you're a fan of true crime, you might want to read this, but really look up all the content warnings because there really is a lot. The next book I finished in March took me forever to read, but I really fucking enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and that's These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I buddy read this book with a bunch of the nicest and sweetest Filipino booktubers, but I finished really late. I still ended up finishing it, and I had a lot of fun discussing it with. This book was literally everyone's most anticipated read last year. It came out in December and everyone just wanted a copy of it. But if you still don't know what These Violent Delights is about, there is a lot to unpack. So These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong is, first of all, a Romeo and Juliet retelling based in Shanghai in 1926 about the heirs of two rival gangs who were former lovers and now have to work together to defeat this weird creature that is causing havoc around Shanghai. Basically, this creature causes some sort of madness that causes people to rip out their own throats. So it's historical, it's political, huge parts romance, but also fantasy. I'm surprised that it didn't even have horror listed in its genres because some of the things that happen in this book is very horrific. None of those are spoilers because they are all stated in the prologue. Even the creature feature bit. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this book, and I was even more surprised at how loyal this was to the original story. This was super intense. Although there were some slow parts, the action-packed ones had my heart pounding so hard. Also the angst between Roma and Juliet, just A+, yes. I love forbidden romance, so a Romeo and Juliet retelling was definitely, obviously, what drew me to this book. Although I'm a little disappointed that Roma was Russian. I kind of hope that both Roma and Juliet were Chinese. I don't know why, but I just kind of hope Roma was Chinese and the whole story was about two opposing Chinese triads. But no, Juliet is Chinese and Roma is Russian. So yeah, I had to live with that. But it was still very enjoyable. I loved almost every minute of it. Actually, even the slow parts I really did enjoy. And the ending, dude, the ending left me in pieces. I need our violent ends like right now, this minute, this second, like yesterday. I need it. By the way, Chloe Gong's writing style is absolutely gorgeous. It is so pretty, but it's not hard to read. Like, it flows easily and it flows so smoothly, but it's really gorgeous. It's so pretty. The next book I read is also 5-star read, and it was a book that I read for a monthly challenge that I will be talking about in my next few videos, maybe. But yeah, it's The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I don't know how to fucking pronounce this. I feel like I should have looked it up first, but I didn't. So yeah, everyone knows The Little Prince, right? The last time I read it, I was in high school, and it was a requirement for English class, and while I did enjoy it, I feel like I didn't finish it. Surprisingly enough, for me, I still have some of the quotes memorized, and I have quoted the various lines from this book throughout the years. And because I actually did really love a lot of the lines here, I thought that a reread was in order. For some reason, this book hit harder this time around. Maybe because I am nearing my 30s. I know it's not obvious. I look like a 12-year-old, but yes, I am nearing my 30s, and the way The Little Prince talked about grown-ups, it just really hit hard. This book was a great reminder not to grow up too fast. Grown-ups are, as The Little Prince said, definitely very odd, and I agree. By the way, I know everyone's favorite quote from The Little Prince is "What is essential is invisible to the eye," but my favorite quote is "You are beautiful, but you are empty. One could not die for you." I don't know why, but that line specifically struck me. Okay, now let's get on to the books that I read for the Filmith Readathon. The first book is The Deathless Girls by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. This book is a sapphic retelling of the story of Dracula's brides. But by the end, I realized that it was more like a backstory of Dracula's brides instead of like an actual retelling of the Dracula's brides. You get it? Yeah. This book fulfilled the prompt for a gorgeous cover, and the cover, you cannot deny, is really pretty, but the essence of the book is just no. If you're looking for an actual retelling of Dracula's brides, this might not be for you, because that's what disappointed me the most. It was marketed as a retelling of Dracula's brides, and for the most part, it's not. It was a backstory, and actual vampires only show up at like 70% into the book. That also means that nothing really happened until like 70% into the book. I had a bit of difficulty with the writing style as well. Like, it tried to be pretty and kind of failed. Overall, it was just an okay experience. But I do salute Kieran Millwood Hargrave for writing this book because I think it is part of a series from Bellatrix that focuses on girls forgotten to literature. So that was a really amazing concept, but the execution just wasn't very good. I'm sorry to say that. And now I understand all the negative reviews. I thought people were like overreacting, but no. It was really boring. I'm so sorry. The next book, at least, is a 5-star read, and that is Life of the Party by Olivia Gatwood. It's a poetry collection, and it is so good. I am not terrified because true crime told me to be. I am terrified because I have been here long enough to know I should be. Just the author's note itself was already so impactful. It started out very strong, and it continued to deliver all throughout the book. The poems were devastating and beautifully haunting. The entire collection was open, honest, and very feminist. It gave me so many emotions to work with, but most of all, rage, which is an emotion I am all too familiar with. But while I'm always angry, this book made me angrier for all the women out there. As a woman, I am angry, and this proves that you should be too. It was just so good, and I urge you to pick it up. I actually heard about this poetry collection from Miranda from Pages and Stages, and I am so glad that she mentioned it. Thank you so much, Miranda. I absolutely adored this poetry collection. Finally, the last book I read in March was Ang Mga Kaibigan ni Mama Susan, or in English, The Friends of Mama Susan by Bob Ong. I have a physical copy, but it's up on my upper shelf and I'm too lazy to get it, so we are going to work with this digital cover. Anyway, Ang Mga Kaibigan ni Mama Susan was thrilling in a way. It's unsettling. It is very creepy. So my sibling and mom were very right. I was super creeped out because I have this weird fear of religious statues. But for the most part, it didn't make a lot of sense. Like, at the beginning, they talked about the main character's dream of seeing like this black lady, and then they didn't like talk about it anymore after like the halfway point. It was just really weird. It was kind of all over the place, much like this review. It was almost like reading an entry from Reddit No Sleep, the subreddit No Sleep. I love that place, but I think I read like better stories on Reddit No Sleep. It was pretty good. Okay, do not get me wrong. And for anyone who wants to read it, I urge you to read it. I just have to say that the first 50 or so pages were kind of unnecessary. Like, nothing happened. I know it was to set up the entire story, but nothing was happening. And it could have been cut down to like 5 or 10 pages at most. I mean, it's super short. It's like 127 pages. So just remove like the first 50 pages, you know. It just really wasn't necessary. I gave it 3 stars. It was an okay experience. I just ended up having a lot of questions. And those are all the books I read in February and March. I am so sorry that this wrap-up is super messy and I probably did not make sense half the time. It's because for this wrap-up, I decided to just go for it. I don't have a script. I have a few notes for each book, but I did not have the usual script that I have for most of my videos. So yes, that's why my thoughts are all over the place. But then again, that's me on a daily basis, so like, is anyone surprised? By the way, for anyone wondering, my hair is not curled. Like, I did not curl this. This is my natural hair. I know most of my videos I have straight hair. I had to iron it, but this time I decided to like go natural. I have naturally curly hair. I don't think it looks that bad, or at least I didn't at the beginning, but now that I am sweating because of the Philippine heat, I am suddenly a little conscious, so I had to tell you. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it even though it was very messy. And I will see you in my next one. Goodbye!